This afternoon, the Finance Committee is kicking off this debate. I'll have some remarks, then the distinguished chairman of the committee, Senator Grassley, will have some remarks. Senator Brown, who has played such a key role in the enforcement issues, will follow. And I'm glad that we are getting on this debate. There is a lot to say about this topic, and I want to talk first about how the new NAFTA got to this point. In the 2016 presidential campaign, then candidate Trump said he was going to pull the United States out of NAFTA. He said, and I quote, "This is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country," unquote. As president, Donald Trump went a different direction. After negotiating with Canada and Mexico, the Trump administration announced a deal in 2018 that actually doubled down on several key mistakes of the original NAFTA. The new NAFTA the Trump administration came up with was way too weak on enforcement of the trade laws. And here in the Senate, we Democrats said it wasn't good enough, not even close, to get through the Congress. So we got down to work and we fixed it. The bill the Senate has now come to be considering is the end product of all that work. This legislation is now the first real measure of certainty and predictability that on the crucial issue of trade that American workers and our businesses and families have. It's the first real measure of certainty and predictability since the beginning of the Trump administration. It now has the strongest trade enforcement system ever written into a trade agreement. And there are significant new resources put into protecting American workers. Unfortunately, there has been an effort by a few on the other side to strip the crucial enforcement resources for enforcing the rights of workers and protecting the environment. There's been an effort to take it out. Now, it is masquerading under a whole lot of procedural lingo. But it's really a Trojan horse to go back to business as usual with weak enforcement of trade laws that doesn't get the job done. Over the last week, and I see the distinguished chairman of the committee here, these procedural gimmicks have been opposed by the chairman and myself, and I want to thank the chairman this afternoon for doing so. For decades, there's been a lot of happy talk in Washington about enforcing trade law, but the government just moved too slowly and did too little to protect American workers when trade cheats came after their jobs. You'd have workers and businesses forced to wait for years for the government to crack down on the rip-off artists, and so often it was too late. Workers laid off, factories shuttered, communities left without a beating economic heart. The original NAFTA was a part of the problem. It made strong enforcement almost impossible and was particularly a problem with labor rights in Mexico. The same governments that allowed corporations to undercut American jobs by paying rock-bottom wages and abusing rights in Mexico had the power to actually block our country from fighting back for the workers. So it was a head-scratcher when the Trump administration proposed essentially a new NAFTA that kept the old broken NAFTA enforcement system. It ought to have been the first part of the original NAFTA that they threw in the trash can. But sure enough, in 2018, the Trump administration agreed to language on trade enforcement that really didn't enforce anything. So Senator Brown, who has fought for years for tough trade law enforcement said, we're going to get together and we're going to change this. We put together a proposal that makes the United States enforcement system faster, tougher, and directly responsive to American workers and businesses that are targeted by the trade cheats. Our approach puts trade enforcement boots on the ground to identify when factories in Mexico break the labor standards we should insist on. It'll be a lot easier to penalize the violators and protect the jobs they threaten to undercut. Senator Brown and I worked with our colleagues, Democratic colleagues on the Finance Committee, but we talked to plenty of Republicans as well. We took our ideas to the House leadership. We got their input and support. We told the Trump administration that tough enforcement with what has come to be known as the Brown-Wyden proposal was going to be a prerequisite to getting the new NAFTA through Congress. As I said, I think this is the toughest labor enforcement measure that our country has seen, and it is a big reason why the AFL-CIO has endorsed the bill. When you combine this all-in approach to enforcement with significant new standards on labor and environmental protection, you also get the benefit of beginning to stop the race to the bottom. You raise other countries to the standards set by our country instead of forcing American workers to compete in a game that's rigged against them. These have been core Democratic trade policies for a long time. Commitments on labor and the environment weren't a part of the original NAFTA. Those issues were just pushed aside into what was essentially called a side letter. They were the trade policy equivalent of a pinky swear and about as easy to enforce. Now they're going to be at the heart of an agreement. The United States will have more power than ever to hold Mexico and Canada to the commitments made in this legislation. On technology and digital trade, something that I put an enormous amount of my time into, the new NAFTA redefines what trade policy will be about. Digital trade wasn't even a part of the original NAFTA because it by and large didn't exist. Smartphones were science fiction. The internet was still years away. Senator Grassley has heard me say this many times. The internet was years away from becoming the shipping lane of the 21st century. The problem has been our trade laws were still stuck in the Betamax mindset. Technology and digital trade are obviously at the core of a modern economy. They account for millions of good-paying jobs. They're woven into every major American industry you can think of. Healthcare, education, manufacturing, agriculture, the list goes on. So when the United States fights for strong rules on digital trade, it's fighting to protect red, white, and blue jobs. That's why the new NAFTA helps to protect our intellectual property and prevent shakedowns of American businesses for their valuable ideas. It also includes something that I felt very strongly about, and that is established U.S. law that protects small technology entrepreneurs who want to build successful, lasting businesses in a field that is now dominated by just a few Goliaths. It is long past time for the United States to bring its trade policy into the modern digital world. Getting smart digital trade rules on the books is not just about boosting exports. What the internet looks like in 10, 20, 50 years is going to be an open question. Will it be an open venue for communication among people around the world, or will more governments follow the lead of China, Russia, Turkey, and Iran? Because what they're talking about could fracture the internet around national borders. Will the internet be a platform for free speech, or will Chinese officials and corporations find new ways to reach across the ocean and trample on the rights of the American people? These are just a few of the important questions the United States will have to confront when it comes to technology. In my view, locking in digital trade rules that protect our jobs, promote free speech and commerce online is a good place to start. Labor rights, environmental protection, rules on technology and digital trade, aggressive enforcement to protect American workers. These are all areas where there has been significant improvement in the new NAFTA. I call this trade done right. My state, along with Senator Grassley's, is so dependent on trade. 1 out of 4 jobs in Oregon revolves around international trade. They often pay better than do the non-trade jobs because they have a higher value-added component. And most of them are small businesses, and they export. Agriculture is a big part of our economy. The new NAFTA will put more of our wine on shelves outside the United States. It will increase dairy exports. It will end unfair practices that discriminate against American-grown wheat. Oregon companies that sell services like apps and engineering plans to customers overseas will have new protections under the digital trade rules. And it will help our manufacturers because the new NAFTA raises the bar and includes those protections on labor rights I've described. There are a lot of members to thank who pitched in. We're going to hear from a number of them on the floor, and I'm going to thank them before we wrap up. And I'll just close with this. The last few years have delivered one trade gut punch after another to our farmers and our shippers and our manufacturers and our exporters. The administration has driven away traditional economic allies. A lot of manufacturers are hurting. Farm bankruptcies have surged. Foreign markets are more closed off, many of them, to American exports than they were before the Trump administration began. With this legislation, we have an opportunity to begin, and I want to underline that, to begin to change that. I particularly want to thank Senator Brown for his laser focus and leadership on the issue of enforcement. I think Senator Cantwell, who probably will speak on this issue soon, has done a particularly good job about trying to build an infrastructure for enforcing our trade laws. And I think it's only appropriate to have a special Senate shout out for Ambassador Lighthizer, who has been straight with members of our committee, and I know the chairman will speak next, and I call him the hardest working man in the trade agreement debate. I support this bill. I hope my colleagues will do it. I know the chairman has his remarks, then Senator Brown will be here, other colleagues will be here, and I know Chairman Grassley is glad we're getting at this. I share his view. And we got plenty to do on health care and other issues, and I look forward to working with them. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.